Welcome to this class exploring the yin saddle pose and its variations. I'm Devi Daly, and the saddle pose is kind of considered the ultimate backbend in yin yoga. It can be challenging, but when approached intelligently and safely, it can also be adapted to just about anybody, and it can be quite therapeutic. So this practice is geared toward all levels, including beginners, and we'll move through a number of preparatory backbends like dragon, half saddle, Sphinx and Seal pose, and of course we'll also counter stretch with forward bending so that we feel balanced in the end. Props are not required for this practice, but they can be very helpful, so I will recommend that you take a few moments to gather some props around you, whether that be sofa cushions, throw pillows, or if you have yoga blocks like bolsters and blocks. Once you have your props, we'll go ahead and dive into our saddle pose exploration. So starting out with either 2 blocks or some cushions under your upper back. So this might look like this with a couple pillows, and if you have enough options, you'll want to maybe get your middle back really nicely firmed up. So play around with the props as you need to get into a position where your head gets to go back enough that you feel an upper back bend. My legs are maybe crossed at the ankles, maybe straight ahead, maybe in butterfly pose. Arms are out at an angle that feels comfortable to you. And if you have yoga blocks or a bolster, then the blocks will be set up with one under your heart, under the back of your heart, and one under your head. And start out with the one under your head higher than the one under your heart. So I'm going to start with these 2 low settings, but if you know that you like the higher settings, go for it. And there's often some tweaking involved in making this comfortable. So as we come into this practice of backbends, this is our first backbend warm-up, getting into the upper back, and that's the primary purpose here. So what gives you a sense that you're opening your upper back, your thoracic spine, the part of the spine that's connected to your ribs. And keep in mind, if your head is too high, then that takes the back bend out if your head is too high in relation to your chest. So if you don't feel much back bend, it might be that the head needs to come down. But if you feel like it's uncomfortable, tension in the neck, like for me, this is too far. So if that's your feeling, then lift the head up higher or take what's under your chest lower. That's how you make it less intense. Lower behind the back, higher under the head. And now I'll show you one more option. If you have a yoga bolster and want to use it instead, you can either have it flat and lie back over it, or incline it on a block or a pillow. So taking our first couple of minutes here to soften into the upper back, to start to tune into the breath. Knowing that each time you breathe, you are filling your ribs, you are expanding your lungs, you are stretching your intercostal muscles from the inside, stretching the body from the inside. And go ahead and soften your face, your jaw. Soften across your chest, your collarbones. Stay where you are. If you notice that you have loosened up into it a bit, you might want to take an adjustment of your support and maybe have your head a little lower or lift your chest a little higher. And now for the last 2 or 3 breaths, take the arms up over the head, let them hang, or hold opposite forearms or opposite elbows, or maybe just interlace the fingers and press the palms away, whatever feels good as a way to lengthen here in your side bodies, your armpits, sides of the ribs. Very good. Release the arms back down now. Draw the knees together if you had them open, and we'll make our way up to a sitting position. If it feels like it will be a good idea for you to roll to the side first, go for that. Otherwise, you can just sit straight up if your back feels okay with that option. And so coming into butterfly pose, soles of the feet together, maybe sitting up on a block or a cushion as you come into your forward bend. So here we have this nice forward bend to emphasize the upper spine. And you can consciously emphasize the upper spine more by actually tucking your tailbone under, maybe not letting your thighs become too internally rotated, I should say. So it's a little bit opposite of the usual alignment we hear for forward bends, where we want to get the chest as open as possible, the spine as open as possible. Here we do quite the opposite. Let the shoulders round, let the head come, let the chin come in toward the chest. And just see how that feels as a counter stretch to that upper back bend. Keeping the connection to your breath. So in the first posture, we sent the breath into the chest, into the ribs, and we were thinking more about the front of the body, and now we can think more about breathing into the back of the body, the back of the ribs, and even into the kidneys, the lower back. And slowly now coming up, and bring the knees together, come all the way down onto your back to rest. any comfortable position on the back for 1 minute. Let the arms and legs sprawl out or spread out to whatever angle feels best for you to fully drop into the force of gravity, drop into this magnetism that the earth has on this body, so that you feel hugged, you feel the sense of being hugged toward the center of the earth. And now bending the knees, hug the knees into the chest. Feel the back of the body lengthening, stretching. Feel the back of the neck stretching and lengthening as you slightly bring your chin down toward your chest. And roll over to one side and come up to hands and knees, moving toward dragon pose. Dragon pose with the right leg forward and the left leg back. So if you're on a harder floor, then starting out with cushion underneath your back leg, either doubling up your yoga mat or putting a folded towel or blanket or something under your back leg could make quite a bit of difference. We'll have the hands on either side of the front foot to begin with, and taking 1 minute in this form of dragon pose. So we're moving into our back bends, and people don't always think of lunges as back bends, but when we think about the parts of the body that need to be stretched and lengthened in order to get into the back bends in yin that we're going to be moving toward here, we want to lengthen the front of this thigh of the back leg. That's a really important range of motion to get into. The front of the hip, left hip here, and the front of the thigh. So what gives you the feeling that you are getting more of a back bend that stretches the front of the hip here? Maybe you will begin now to bring the weight over onto the left hand and let the hip dip down. Maybe taking both hands on the inside of the foot. So this is just an exploration for you to find what works best for you, to feel that this left side of your lower back is finding a back bend. And if you have yoga blocks and want to use those under the hands, go for it. Maybe a little bit higher here, or one block under the left hand and elbow or hand on the knee here. So moving into our second minute here now, let's explore a little bit higher up. So that might mean this hand comes on the knee, or if it doesn't feel too unstable to you, then bringing the hands to clasp on the front leg, or perhaps a different arm position where the hands come behind the back, or they could clasp and extend. Just something where we get more of this back bending feeling. For some of you, there is the range of motion to start to extend this leg forward and come towards something like a split. We don't want to get too young about it though, so if your hips don't rest down, think about using a pillow or a block or a couple of blocks under the front leg, even if that's going to be quite high and you're just still looking more like a lunge, but able to relax into that support. So a little more of a back bended dragon pose by lifting up the torso. And you can stay here for our last half a minute, or if you'd like to move into one of these variations where we dip the hips a little bit more, you could come into this kind of twisted dragon pose, drop the elbow down to the ground as another option. And final option, which is not for everybody, then reach back and hold the left foot with your right hand for the dragon tail pose. A strap could be used around the foot if it's difficult to reach the foot. Continuing to emphasize the front of your left thigh, the front of your left hip, as you do this twisted variation. If you're in that dragon tail pose, think about creating the back bend in the pose, sending the head back in space, sending the shoulder back in space. It's kind of a back bend of your whole left side. Very good. Releasing your variation, come into a downward facing dog pose. Walk your legs in downward dog. And drop the knees and come into it on the second side, left leg forward. Starting out now, hands on either side of the front foot for the first minute here. And noticing sensations in this back leg and the front of the right thigh, the front of the right hip. And if you want to explore hands both on the inside of the foot, if that works better for you to feel the front of the thigh in front of the hip, go for it. And now moving into more back bend with some variation that is higher up in the torso. So hands clasped on the leg, a block under the right hand, 2 blocks under each hand, or the hands behind the back in some way. Also the option of having a block or 2 under the thigh and extending the foot forward. And now taking it into that final twisting variation, which could be right hand under the shoulder, and it's often helpful to walk the foot farther out to the side. So walk your left foot as far out as you need to. Don't feel constrained by the width of your yoga mat. If you're on a mat, you could do something more like a tripod where the 2 feet and the hand are all quite far away from each other. And you can let that hip dip down. You could come down onto the elbow if it feels good, or reach back for that back leg for the dragon tail. And so what we are working into in this saddle pose exploration and moving into yin back bends, it's not about achieving poses, it's about working into a certain range of motion or collection of ranges of motion in the body and stimulating those areas in whatever way works best for your body. So it's not about getting the dragon tail pose. That's not a good choice for everybody's body, but for those that it works for, it feels good. And come on out of it, please. Make your way back into downward dog. Take a moment or two in dog pose. Feeling the hips, feeling the thighs after that exploration on two sides of dragon pose. And when you're ready, drop the knees, come into child's pose. And feeling this counter stretch in child's pose after doing that asymmetrical back bending right and left sides. Now this nice gentle forward bending in the lower back. And coming up now to sit in Seiza pose or some version of Seiza with props. So Seiza pose is sitting directly on the heels like this or sitting on some stuff between your feet. And when I say stuff, I mean a couple blocks or some pillows. So blocks usually work well between the feet, 1 or 2 blocks. I've even seen people with 3 blocks. If you're going to use something that's more cushion-like, then what is more helpful than between the feet, because sometimes your feet end up too wide. You might like it, and if it feels fine, then that's fine as long as your knees are okay with it. You can sit on your cushions as high as you like them. But for a lot of people, this works better, having the cushions be on top of the feet, so the feet come closer together. So up to you, between the feet, on top of the feet, or some combination. And also, if you have a folded or a rolled blanket or towel, sometimes getting that roll long ways between the legs is a nice way to support the tailbone or to support the pelvis without having props that spread the legs out too wide. So we are going to take a couple of minutes in Seiza pose. And so Seiza pose we sometimes do just as a seated alternative pose, as a meditation pose. Today we're doing it as an actual yin pose. So I want to make sure, if you are someone who struggles with Seiza, with sitting on the heels like this, please do take the time to get the props that you need so that you can experience what we want to start opening up with this pose, which is the front of the ankle, tops of the feet, the fascia around the knees. And even if your knees complain about doing this pose, there should be some amount of, even if you're lifting up this high with lots of support under your seat, there should be some amount of getting into this shape that you can do so that you get a sustainable and not painful amount of stretching here. And resting here, the hands can be on the thighs, they can be folded in the lap. Pay attention to the tops of your feet, the fronts of your shins. If there's any discomfort with the hardness of the floor that you're on, then cushion is important here. Having a folded towel, blanket, some amount of cushion so you don't have that discomfort of bones against the floor. open if you had them closed. And now taking 1 minute to explore some way of sitting in between your feet. And so it's not good for everyone's knees to just sit directly on the ground, and typically your knees will tell you pretty quick if that's the case. So cushioning as much as you want, as much as you need to sit between your feet. And here we just get a little bit of a different sensation, but it's still called Seiza pose when we sit upright. And so if your body says no way, then listen to your body. Don't force anything here. But I want to get you to experiment with the different options for when we move into saddle variations. There's always the choice to sit in between the feet or on top of the feet. So now that we've tried both, you probably have a good idea of which one your body prefers. And now we'll start to take it into some one-legged variations. So we move into the half saddle pose here. And let's begin by taking the side version. So you're on your left elbow and your right foot comes behind you like so. And this is maybe where you stay, and this is maybe where you use a strap around the foot, a belt or anything. And this is a very similar range of motion to what we worked with in the dragon pose. The front of the thigh and the front of the hip. If it's within your range of motion to bring the foot back, then you might be here. And you can see my pelvis is still tilted at about a 45 degrees, and that might feel like enough. And even lifting up higher on the hands might be more doable or more comfortable for you. And coming onto your elbows or onto your back is the final option here. With further variations of what you decide to do with this left leg. The knee could be bent, the knee could open out to the side, the leg could be straight. So this range of motion, this is the stomach and spleen meridian that runs through the front of the right thigh and up and over the front of the right hip. And often getting the stretch of this area is some kind of compromise, some kind of negotiation between the amount of sensation in the knee, which is not what we want to feel a lot of, while getting the stretch here. And so we have all these different ways of finding the pose, of getting into it. There's always propping options here. Coming onto a bolster, inclining a bolster, or once I start to get high enough, you could start to think, oh, maybe I might as well just rest back against my sofa or my bed, and that's a perfectly fine option here. To use your furniture, use what's near you. Releasing your half saddle on this side. So maybe that's rolling back over onto your left side to tuck the leg, or whatever way works for you to get out of it. And moving into it on the second side. So you'll begin on your right elbow, or you'll come into it by tucking the foot back if you know that you're just going straight back. And so if you're on the right elbow, you're holding the leg here like so. Maybe coming all the way down if you want to, or maybe staying here on the elbow. This bottom leg could bend. What we want to make sure we do is keep the knee moving back in space so that it's not just staying up here, because that's not stretching the front of the thigh. If we keep it up like this, we want to think about the knee coming back in space and think about a back bend happening in the left side of the spine. So another variation I will show you, because I have an ottoman here to show you this way of doing half saddle with some support under the hips. So kind of a lot of support in this variation, where I'm on the edge of my sofa or my bed, and taking it like so, maybe even with 2 blocks under the seat. So some of you don't need all these options, but when I teach public classes, I always have quite a bit, or live classes I should say, when I teach in-person classes, I always have, those of you who've been there, half of my students just say, oh, I don't do that pose, that my knees don't do that. And that's a good way to allow your knees and hips to continue to deteriorate and degenerate, is to just never even try to get into this range of motion. So there is a way for you to stretch and stimulate this channel in gentle ways, even if it's just mega propped like this. So I want to show you all the options so that you don't have an excuse. That said, as I hope you know by now, I want you to always listen to your body, take care of your body, and if your body is still with all these different variations and options saying, no, this is not good for me, then listen to your body before you listen to me. And now slowly making your way out of your version of half saddle, rolling to the side, or whatever exit strategy works best. Make your way onto your back, rest on your back for 1 full minute. Feeling the breath and feeling the sensations in the body as they move, as you feel the chi that was stimulated in the posture, changing, shifting, spreading. And now bending your knees, draw them into the chest. And lift your head up toward your knees. And release your head back down. Roll over onto one side and come up for the Sphinx pose. So we've been working with mostly the lower half of the body in the back bending range, and now we're moving into more the upper body range so that we can put it all together in the end. So as we come into the Sphinx or the Seal pose, the hands come flat on the ground, or they can clasp, or they can be palms up. It doesn't really matter what the hands are doing. It's about this back bend happening in your lower spine. We'll be 3 minutes here. If you want more sensation, you can come into the saddle pose. And when you take the saddle pose, you have a lot of options of how to hold your arms here. They can be farther forward. Did I call it saddle? This is called seal pose. I think I just called it saddle. This is called the seal pose. And if you have your hands wider apart, some people like to have the hands angled out quite a bit, and that's fine if it feels good to your arm bones. We want to, however we angle the hands, get a sense that we're able to actually lock the arm bones and rest into the arm bones. And if that means your shoulders come up, that's fine. If you like the feeling of lifting the head up out of the shoulders a bit more, that's also fine. So play around with it. Find some movement here if it helps you to explore it. Hands can be farther forward for a less steep angle, for less sensation, or stay right here in the Sphinx. So the primary target area is the lumbar spine, the lower back. And we're halfway through, so if you have been in the Sphinx and feel ready to have a little more sensation now, then you could take your second half up in Seal. And here we'll take a moment, whether you are down on your elbows or up on your hands, to explore the width between the legs. So take a moment to widen your legs from wherever they are. Just widen them out and see what that does to what you're feeling in your lower back. And then take a moment to bring them closer together than they were when you started and see how that changes things. So typically there's more sensation in the spine, and particularly more in the sacrum, when you bring the legs closer together. And then there's an ease of that stretch or that stimulation of the lower back when you widen your legs. Neither one is right, neither one is better. But if you struggle in backbends, then that's kind of it's what I call the secret rule of backbends. You can widen your legs. And often our traditional yoga alignment rules have instructions to not widen the legs, that's a bad thing. But I do question that alignment instruction in most cases. And I'll talk about that ad nauseum in my yin yoga training if you take it ever. Let's come down onto the belly. Resting on the belly, rest your hands under your forehead, stack the hands, and feel into your lower back. And now slowly lift the hips, bring them up and back into child's pose. Take your time, bending the spine the opposite way once again. And coming up, and we are ready for the grand finale, after which we will do some really nice feeling forward bends after all these different kinds of back bends. So saddle pose. I will show you a number of variations, and they involve props in most cases. So if you're using yoga blocks, you can have 2 blocks under your back at some height, and you can sit on your heels or between your heels, and we explored that earlier. So take your pick, and here's one choice. 1 block under the heart. So this is very much like the options we used in the first pose, except we didn't have the legs back like this, and so this is where it becomes a very different sensation for a lot of people. So your body might be saying, no way, I'm not doing that, and I have some options for you if that's the case. So maybe you're there, maybe you are lying all the way back with no problem, maybe you want more support. So here's a little step way of inclining a yoga bolster, or a sofa cushion could be used on top of blocks, or whatever way you want to incline it. So this is a much less steep angle for feeling this range of motion. And now some might need some support under the seat. So this can be your 2 blocks or some cushions like so. And what I want to, well, I'll say that later actually. So as I have this support under my seat, I have made this structure behind myself a lot farther away, and it's quite a deep stretch to come this far back. So I have decided that I'm not going to try and go that far back. I need to maybe just stay right up here, maybe have some blocks under my hands or some other kind of support under my hands and just stay like this, or set up near an ottoman or a sofa or a bed and make wonderful use of the furniture. So here is a great way to get into this pose. A couple blocks under the seat if you want them, if you need them. And it's same as what we did as an option for half saddle, is leaning back like this on the hands, on the elbows, or depending on what your object is you're lying back on, maybe you can spread your arms out and come all the way back. So by now, hopefully you have found your pose, some combination of keeping the legs bent and leaning back, even if your angles are not as steep as what I've shown in some of the variations. As long as you're feeling a stretch in the front of the thigh and the front of the hip and some back bending here, you might feel everything here in the front of the thigh, and that's fine. That's a sign that you have a lot of tension to work through here, and so you're doing good work. This range of motion, when we work into it, is a wonderful way to keep the lower back healthy. When this part of the body is very tight, chronically tight from lots of sitting and from a lack of stretching, then we put our lower back at risk because the pelvis gets locked in an anterior tilt. And there's a lot of excess holding in the lower back as a result of that typically. And this is where a lot of the lower back syndromes can come from. And sacroiliac pain, sacrum pain. Staying where you are. One more minute. And very slowly now, coming out of whatever shape you have managed to get yourself into, come into a resting position on your back. Oh. 1 minute of rest. So your sensations at this point might be in the front of the thighs and the front of the hips along that stomach and spleen meridian, or might be in the lower back, the lumbar spine, the sacrum area, which is the area of the kidney meridian. Maybe somewhere else, maybe there's other energy moving in your system. Whatever's happening inside, notice it, feel it, be with it. And now take the knees, draw them into the chest, wrap the arms around, clasp the hands, or wrap tighter if you like, and just gently rock side to side. Now take one hand onto each knee and gently circle your knees around. So 3 times in one direction. And then 3 times in the other direction. Good, and now come all the way over onto one side, preparing for our final pose, forward bending. And we will do half butterfly pose, starting with the left leg forward and the right leg bent. So sit up on a pillow if you'd like. Prop this bent knee if you'd like. Come forward over the leg or to the inside of the leg, whichever feels better for you today. Props under the elbows or under the head are always an option here. And slowly releasing and slowly change sides. Right leg forward, left leg bent. And slowly releasing, coming up and making your way down onto your back into your final relaxation position. Make yourself comfortable with any additional props or blanket. Making any final adjustments to the position of your arms and your legs, the angle of the arms and legs and hips and shoulders, so that you feel completely relaxed and able to release into the earth entirely. Unhinging the jaw, softening the legs and the arms, softening the belly and the chest and the back, and softening the neck and the head and the face. And allowing the energy of this practice, the energy stimulated by this practice, to flow through you, knowing that the Saddle pose and all of its variations are kind of strong energy movers in the body. And so what you're feeling right now might be new, might be different, might be a sensation of your awareness just really being pulled into your physical body. And with the stimulation of the second chakra, the sacrum area, there might be some particular sensations around that area or around the bowl of the pelvis and the back of the body, or the front of the hips, front of the pelvis. Taking about 3 more long, deep breaths with whatever is happening inside of this body. And as you take your next exhalation, go ahead and stretch out into your fingers and your toes and stretch your arms and legs. Nice big inhaling breath here, and as you exhale, bend your knees, roll over onto one side, and come up slowly into a sitting position of your choice with your spine tall. Close your eyes. Rest your hands or place your hands in front of your heart, palms together. And chanting Om 3 times. Inhale the breath. Om. Om. That's our practice. Thank you so much for joining me. Namaste. I hope you enjoyed this class. If you did, please leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and check out my other yoga videos. And I'll see you next time.